Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Christmas Advent day number 10. Today I'm going to be showing you some different methods for creating highlights on your coloured pencil pieces. So the methods that I'm going to show you are using a white pencil and solvent, using an embossing tool, a craft knife and some acid-free tape. So we're going to look at the first method, and that is using white pencil and solvents. So to begin with, what I'm doing is just layering down some colours so that we can get a nice opaque dark colour so I can show you these. So I'm just making some black fur just with some warm grey one, some cold grey one, and then I'm layering some dark sepia over there. So for this method, what you want to do is make sure you've got down as many layers as you need before you start blending your solvent. So you always want to make sure you have more layers when using solvent than less, because you can get a grainy look and you can get an uneven blend when you don't use as many layers as you possibly could. So all you do is just layer down your colours to where you want them to. You blend out with your solvent and continue building your layers until you're at your topmost layers when you want to add those really white highlights back in. And this is where you use your solvent for the last time, you let it dry, and then you go in with a really sharp white pencil. The pencil that I'm using is the Caran d'Ache Luminance white pencil. I've also shown here that you can use other varieties, so I've also used the Prismacolor white pencil as well. So you want to go in with a really nice sharp white pencil, and then you just want to layer down on top of your dark coloured fur or any kind of coloured fur that you may have been drawing. So what this does, the solvent blends the pigment and the binder of the pencil into the tooth of the paper, so you get rid of that waxy build-up that you often get when you're burnishing and blending just with coloured pencils alone. Blends that down into the paper, so you are working back on top of your piece like it's brand new paper, because you've got the tooth of the paper coming through where that blender has just broken everything down and worked it into the paper, so you're left with no waxy build-up on the surface. So it's really easy to add white coloured pencil over the top using this method, because obviously you've got no waxy build-up, you've got no resistance when trying to add these light colours down. So the second method that I'm showing you is using an embossing tool. I do have a tutorial on this using a different coloured fur, and I'll leave a card up above and a link in the description for you to check that out so you can see it on a different coloured fur as well. But all you do for this is, before you lay down any colour, you map out with your embossing tool where you want your hairs to be. So if you look at your reference picture or whatever you're working from, you map out those little highlighted hairs. They might be whiskers or fine lines, anything like that. You map out first with your embossing tool. So you can use any size embossing tool relevant to your drawing. I'm just using a small one here because I'm just using a small sample. So you put down your lines, you work them in the direction that your fur's going, you make it look like your reference photo or whatever you're trying to draw, and then you just layer your colours over the top. And when you lay your colours over the top, it will act as a sort of resist, so you won't get any of the colour filling in those embossed lines because you've actually made a groove and dent in the paper. This is a really useful trick, and it's a really fast way of adding highlighted or like wiry type fur or whiskers or anything like that. It's just a really quick and easy tip, just showing you also that you can just fill in some of those hairs with the pencil, just using a sharp pencil, and you can fill in the grooves. If you need to tone them down, or if you realise that you've made too many or something like that, you can actually fill them back in. It takes a little practice and a little bit of time and patience, but you can do it. So the next method is actually using a craft knife. So I'm using a Swan Morton craft handle, and I'm using some Swan Morton blades as well. It's really important that you have quite a sharp blade when doing this, because it's that sharp point which actually removes the colour. So when we're using this method, what we're actually doing is just scraping away the surface and scraping away those layers of colour. So I like to use my craft knife upside down, so I use it so that the blade is actually pointing up. I find that this is the best way for me personally. You can hold it however you want, but you want to make sure that you don't put very much pressure through the knife, otherwise you will actually damage the paper. So when you're using this method, you want to work in the direction that your fur's going in and just gently scrape along the surface of your coloured pencil. You don't want to push hard, because if you're using a really sharp blade like I am here, you will cut your paper and then it will damage your overall portrait. I'm just showing you as well that you can use the blade in different ways. So I'm using it so the blade is actually facing the bottom as well as the top. You just need to make sure that you use a very, very light hand. Your colour pencil comes away really, really easily when using this method. You can also group your little fur lines or whatever you're creating into one patch so you can get a bigger patch of colour show through. You can make wavy lines, you can do really, really fine ones. But if you group the lines together, as you can see, I've got some lighter lines and some darker lines, so if you group them together you can get some bigger fur strokes. So with this method you really, really want to be careful that you don't damage the tooth of the paper or cut into the paper at all. I would recommend, before actually working on a coloured pencil piece that you intend to sell or commission or anything like that, I would recommend practicing with this method before actually using it on any of your pieces, because you don't want to do the method wrong and end up ruining your piece. That would be the worst thing in the world that you could do. So the next method that I'm going to show you guys is using an acid-free tape to remove the colour from the area that you're working from. So I like to use a Scotch Magic tape for this, but any kind of acid-free low-tack tape will actually work wonders for this method. So I use a piece of tape and then I use a sharp implement to remove the colour. So I'm using an embossing tool to just work over the tape to add some fur lines and some patches that I want to remove. So the first method that I'm showing you is actually just applying the tape loosely on its own to your piece. And I always find with this that I often stick the tape accidentally to surrounding areas and then remove colour from that, and then have to work back over the piece to add the colour back into the bit that I accidentally removed. So when I'm using this method, I'm trying my best not to get the tape stuck to any other areas of the piece, and it can be quite fiddly and tricky to do this. What I actually do is use a shield, which I apply the tape to so I can move the tape around to the specific area that I want. So to make a shield, all I did was just cut up a scrap piece of cardboard, I cut a hole in it, and then what you do is just apply your tape over the top. You want to make sure that if you're using a shield like this, that you make sure that your tape is quite tight across it, because if it's sagging in the middle, then it's going to just stick to your paper and any areas that you don't want it to regardless. So you can see that as I'm using this method, I can move it freely around my work and the tape isn't sticking. So this is a really good way to move your tape around to get to the area that you actually want to. So then all I'm doing is just using the embossing tool to remove some lines. I'm also showing you that you can use a sharp pencil, works just as well as using an embossing tool. You can use any kind of tool to work over your tape to remove the colour. You just want to make sure it's sharp and has the thickness of the hairlines or anything that you want to remove. So when using this method, I find that it doesn't remove the colour from the paper as much or as good as the craft knife, or it doesn't have as whiter an effect as the embossing tool. So what I do when I use this method is just use a sharp white pencil to go over the white lines. So I just used a sharp Caran d'Ache Luminance white pencil to just introduce a bit more white colour over those lines. So that's it for this video, just 4 short methods on how you can create highlights in your fur or in your coloured pencil work. Hopefully you found this video useful, and maybe there are some methods here that perhaps you hadn't thought about before and want to try in your own work. I would be really interested to know which methods you guys use to create highlights in your own work. Do you use any of the methods that I've suggested here, or do you have any other methods that you may have tried? Leave me a comment down below. If you liked this video, then please give it a thumbs up, and a share with your arty friends is always appreciated. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tick that bell icon to be notified of Advent videos and future videos as soon as they're released. And I will see you in tomorrow's Advent video. Bye!